Happy Easter! Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Risen, absolutely, assuredly, beyond question, categorically, certainly, decidedly, definitely, doubtlessly, emphatically, factually, incredibly, immeasurably, indisputably, literally, mightily, no doubt, notably, plainly, positively, powerfully, precisely, really, remarkably, strikingly, surely, tremendously, truly, undeniably, unquestionably, unequivocally, he is risen indeed. Thank you, Mr. Thesaurus. Hey, good morning and God's great blessings to you on this Resurrection Day. So glad that you are watching today. But I sure do wish that I could see you this Easter. It's hard when I can't see you. Hey, did you catch that part about Mary Magdalene not being able to see on Easter? Take a look. Jesus asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" Thinking Jesus was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." She couldn't see Jesus. He was right there in front of her, but she couldn't see. It's hard to see when you're crying. It's hard to see when what you were expecting isn't what it is. It's hard to see the living when you're looking for the dead. Well, sometimes it's hard to see Jesus. She didn't recognize him. She didn't see him at first, but he was there all along. Has that ever happened to you? I bet it has. It happens to me all the time, and I love it. Let me explain. I find it really cool to see something that I hadn't seen before, especially when it was there all the while, even when I was looking right at it. I'll show you what I mean. They do this a lot with logos. There's usually a lot more going on than meets the eye. You might recognize this one. Nice and simple, right? A company name with two different bold colors. But if you look between the E and the X, you'll spot the arrow that's formed in the gap, representing speed and forward motion, which is a good thing for a shipping company. The famous Baskin-Robbins logo has a great hidden meaning within it. The initials BR have been separated into two different colors, blue and pink. And this, of course, makes the middle section of the logo look like the number 31 for 31 flavors of ice cream. Pretty clever. Same concept with Tostitos. The middle letters, the T's, are sharing a chip over a bowl of salsa, the I. This one looks like a smiley face. Or is it a lowercase g for goodwill? It's both. Now, Wendy's does a little something subliminal with their logo. Maybe you can make out the word mom on Wendy's shirt collar, implying home cooking, just like mother used to make. Yeah, right. A couple more, and it really pains me to show you this one. Yuck! Oh, gross. Both Cubs and Cardinal fans agree on dissing the Brewers. But it is a fun logo because the fielder's glove and ball contain the letters M and lowercase b for Milwaukee Brewers. Did you know our church does a little something like that with our logo? You might see this one around Messiah. It looks like a cross, and it is, which is made up of 3 L's, which stand for love, learn, and live. Love Jesus, learn from Jesus, and live for Jesus. Hey, here's a fun one. Question: what is the state animal of Missouri? And I'll tell you, it's a mule. Keep that in mind. Do you see it? It's staring right at you, between the M and the U. And to tell you the truth, I don't know if that mule is there on purpose or if it was a happy accident, but I bet you won't be able to unsee it from now on. Last one. We all know this one. Amazon is crazy popular, now more than ever. You probably see this one just about every day. One word, fairly simple, and the orange underneath looks just like a smile, and it is. But it's also an arrow going from the A to the Z, which represents the fact that they sell an enormous range of items, including everything from A to Z, except for toilet paper. Nevertheless, it is very clever. That's why we ripped it off for Easter. This is our 2020 Easter button logo, and we have a whole bunch of them waiting for you at Messiah, and we'll be happy to hand them out on that first Sunday when we're all physically back together again. But if there aren't any out-of-towners who want an Easter button, let us know, and we'll be happy to mail out one or more to you right away. Just let us know. But do you see it? Easter, with an arrow leading us from the cross to the E for empty tomb, which of course puts a smile on our face. Logos. Do you know Logos is another name for Jesus? Logos. The same spelling but different pronunciation. Logos, a short O. It's a Greek word. Logos means word. That's what they call Jesus, the Word. That's how the disciple John begins his account. He says, in the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. No, they did not. God was right there with them, right there in front of their face, right there all along. But they didn't see him. Everyone had their opinion, but hardly anyone recognized him as God. They mistook Jesus for a nice guy, a wise teacher. Some thought he was just the carpenter's kid. Others saw a drunkard, a glutton, a rebel, a magician, a political savior, a wannabe Messiah. Those in charge thought Jesus to be nothing but trouble and a blasphemer, and so they nailed him to a cross. They watched him die. It's over, or so they thought. The Romans, the Pharisees, the religious rulers, the devil himself had won, or so they thought. And what about Jesus' friends? They were mistaken as well. They saw a crucifixion. Jesus had breathed his last. Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea wrapped him up in strips of linen in accordance with Jewish burial customs, and they placed him in a cave of death. Jesus lost, and they did too. It's over, or so they thought. Oh, it's not like Jesus didn't tell them ahead of time that this was exactly what was going to happen. He told them repeatedly, the Son of Man will suffer and die, and in 3 days he will rise. This was God's intentional plan ever since mankind's fall into sin. It wasn't a murder, it was a sacrifice. The cross was how God was reconciling the world to himself, paying for sin, all of it, for all time. But they didn't see that. I guess it's hard to see when death is staring you in the face. I love this quote by Andy Stanley. On that first Easter, nobody was expecting no body. The disciples sat around staring at each other, not saying much, dejected and dismayed. But the women went to work. They went with their spices to anoint Jesus' dead body. And they were wondering who was going to roll that stone away. Nobody was expecting no body. But there it wasn't. Stolen? Why? Who? And so Mary Magdalene raced back to tell the disciples, and Peter and John jumped to their feet, and they take off running for the tomb. They ran, but it wasn't far. Golgotha and the tomb were just outside the city walls. John, who refers to himself as the other disciple, he arrives at the tomb first. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. But what he saw so stunned him that he froze at the entrance. What did he see? It's hidden right in the middle of our Easter text, but it's been there all along. It's the burial cloths. Take a look. There's so much more here than meets the eye. John points us to two items, the strips of linen, as well as the burial cloth that had been around Jesus' head. That cloth was folded up by itself, separate from the linen. Well, let's look at the strips of linen first. Our English translation of the Bible doesn't help that much, but the original Greek language is super insightful. A quick translation. The linen strips of cloth were still in their folds. They had not been ripped off and thrown down. They were still in their original state. They lay there undisturbed. You get it? Yeah, Jesus is risen indeed. He passed right through them. And John sees no one took the body. Something unheard of has happened. Jesus' body must have been transformed in some way. The outer wrapping, the bandages remained, but the body that they had covered was gone. John knew what had happened. Nevertheless, some didn't see. They thought, even still today, think that the body was stolen. I'm not seeing it. Now, this is very logical. Think this through with me. Here's why the body wasn't stolen. First off, ask yourself, if you were a body snatcher, which is easier to transport quickly in the dead of night, a wrapped up body or an unwrapped one? You know that dead bodies are easier to move when they're wrapped up, right? How do you know that? Anyway, now, I'm not speaking from personal experience, but it stands to reason that a wrapped-up body would be easier to transport than an unwrapped one with the arms and legs all flopping around. Just saying. Secondly, if you're stealing a body, why would you take the time to unwrap it? What would be the point of that? Thirdly, even if someone or someone's did unwrap Jesus' dead body, why on earth then would they so carefully take the strips of linen and fold them in such a time-consuming, orderly fashion? Doesn't make sense. And finally, John records that Jesus' body was wrapped up in 75 pounds of myrrh and spices. As they wrapped the body, they poured in all that aloe and myrrh and spices into the wrappings. These liquid spices would soon harden and would cause the cloth wrappings to become all encrusted like a cocoon glued shut. So the only way you could get a body out would be to painstakingly cut the cloth from one end to the other and then pull the body out, even if you could, because the body itself would be glued to the wrappings as well. But John doesn't record that. No, he said that the linen cloths were lying there, meaning uncut, undisturbed, lying as they had been, yet empty of a body. Okay, that's the body wrappings. Now, what about the face cloth? The text says that it was folded up. This is key. Why? Oh, pay attention, because this is good. A very cool detail. You see, the custom was to wrap the body in strips of linen, kind of like a mummy, except they left the face in full sight, and they just kind of wrapped around the head, but leaving the face open. Then they placed a cloth over the face. John, the eyewitness, takes an entire verse to tell us that the napkin was neatly folded and separate from the linen. Was this important? Yeah. Pay attention to this. I don't know where I first read it or saw it, but every time I read John's Easter account, I can't unsee it. In order to understand the significance of the folded face cloth, you have to know a little bit about the Hebrew tradition of that day. The folded napkin had to do with the master and the servant, and every Jewish boy knew of this tradition. When the servant set the dinner table for the master, he made sure it was exactly the way that the master wanted it. When the table was set perfectly and all the food and all the drink was in place, then the servant would wait just out of sight until the master had finished eating. But the servant wouldn't touch the table until the master was 100% completely finished. But how would the servant know if the master was finished or just getting up to take a break and come back later and continue? Well, here's how. Now, if the master was done eating, he would rise from the table, he would wipe his fingers, his mouth, he'd clean up his beard, and then he would wad up his napkin and toss it onto the table or onto the floor. The servant would then know that it was okay to clean everything up, because a wadded up napkin communicated that the master was finished. However, if the master got up from the table and folded the napkin and laid it beside his plate, then the servant dare not touch the table, because the folded napkin means the master is coming back. That's why Jesus folded the napkin. He came back from death. He lives. How cool is that? Very. John peeked into that tomb and he saw the big picture because of the often overlooked details are staring him right in the face. The strips of linen, the folded napkin, and he saw and believed. Those weren't death clothes. Those were victory rags. John saw and believed. And Peter? Well, Peter at first didn't know what to think. And maybe that's you. Maybe you don't know what to think about Easter either. You're like Peter. I'll tell you, Peter, you are my favorite. I am so glad you're watching today. My hope for you is that you keep on looking into the empty tomb, because it means everything. It is a matter of death and life. Take a good look. Jesus is the only one who predicted his own death and resurrection, and then he pulled it off. He is risen for you. He did it for you. Don't miss it. My prayer is that in some way Jesus has come to you this morning. And I believe he has. All you got to do is open the door. Even better than Amazon Prime, because it's free. Not just free delivery, the gift itself is free. It cost Jesus plenty. It cost him his life. But he did it for you. You are incredibly important to Jesus. And you are incredibly important to Messiah Lutheran Church. We are with you and we are for you. And if we can help you figure out what the Easter package is all about, or help you unpack some of it, or point you to a resource, please just reach out to us through our website, because it would be an honor to connect with you and walk with you and show you Jesus, because I believe God has some great, great plans for you, Peter. But maybe, hey, you're not Peter and you're not John. Maybe you come to Easter this morning like Mary Magdalene. Hey, it is a confusing time for all of us, but maybe especially so for you. You've been crying. You come with tears, and it's hard to see anything good right now. Your vision is blurry, and you can't see what's in front of you because you're looking through a filter of pain and heartache. And maybe you just can't see Jesus. You pray, where are you, Jesus? I don't feel you. I don't see you. Do you care what I'm going through? Do you see me? If those questions sound like yours, then there's a story that I'd like you to hear. A fire broke out in a family's home, and everyone escaped to the front yard except the little girl, who was forced to flee to an upstairs balcony window. And as the flames crept up the side of the house, the girl's father stood below her, and he called out to her, "Sweetie, jump, I'll catch you." The daughter approached the edge, but she couldn't see anything except for flames and smoke. And so she drew back from the edge in fear. She said, "I can't, I'm afraid." Her dad knew that his little girl's life depended on her jumping, so he kept yelling, "Jump! I'll catch you! I promise!" But the girl sobbed, "I can't see you." The father replied, "But I can see you, and that's all that matters." And she jumped safely into the arms of her loving father. Oh, he sees you. He sees you. Whether you be a Mary or a Peter or a John, he sees you as a son, as a daughter. He sees you as his dearly loved. That's why the cross. That's why the empty tomb and everything in between. Jesus paid for sin in full. Death, hell, the devil have been defeated, and new life and forgiveness and peace and hope for today and promised future home in heaven. That is the gift. Open the door. He has done great things. Why? Because he cares for you. He's been with you the whole time. Right there, all along. See and believe. He is the Christ. He is the Savior. He is the resurrection and the life. And he is risen for you. Happy Easter and happy always.